If you want to learn more about effective management, head over to mattsingers.com and sign up for my free management training.
Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome back to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today, I'm joined by John Shukurov. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
I'm super excited for today's conversation. You're the first Uzbek on my podcast, so I'm super excited to have a good chat with you and see what we can learn from you.
Terrific, sounds good. And an interesting fact, the Uzbekistan is not considered as a minority country by the US standards. So for some reason, US maps are still outdated and they think we're Russians from the Soviet Union per se. And when one of our entities have minority business enterprise certification, which helps you to gain some government contract. And when we were at the interview with the officers, we asked them, is Uzbekistan considered as a minority country? And they're like, nope. And then I go to them, I'm like, okay, how many business owners from Uzbekistan have you seen in your life? And they said, you're the first one. And I'm like, really? We're not a minority. Well, I mean, it's a little deviation from the.
Yeah, makes sense. Just before we kick off, it would be great if you could give us all a little bit of background into who you are and how you ended up in where you are right now and so on.
Well, yeah, with your permission, I'll take you back to the year of 2005 when I was a student and pursuing the whole American dream, which was delivered via Hollywood. I've decided to come to America, but little did I know what was awaiting for me back then. So we were placed in a single trailer with 12 of us, literally was poorly ventilated trailer where we only had like one black and white TV and the burgundy phone on top of this little coffee table. And I still remember calling my mom over the phone. Back then, there was no Zoom or video conferencing. And I was calling her and she's like, how is the country, my son, right? And she'd go excited. I'm like, Mom, the roads are so wide and there are no potholes. Every single light pole works. But I couldn't tell her that I feel like I'm being in captive in this country, which is the leader in the whole world. And I was kept as a captive because, and I kind of compare it to slave-like conditions, unfortunately, because I never got paid for this. We were picked up, we were dropped off. And when I called my cousin, who I only knew had seen once in Uzbekistan years ago, I didn't know how he would react. And I would call him, I'm like, hey, cuz, like, how can I get out from this? He's like, here's your flight ticket. Here's how you're going to come. And when I told this to those employers who brought us back then, they said that I would be deported and sent back home and etc. So, well, that was unfortunately a beginning experience for me here in the States.
That sounds not so fun. But I guess all difficult times kind of it forces you to step up, I guess.
Yes, you are so correct, right? Whatever happened to us in the past is brought us to this moment. And I'm super thrilled and honored to be here on your podcast.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about your business. What's the business you have right now? And
so I've got several businesses. The entity count is I somewhat go confused a little bit, but in that year in 2005 when I arrived, I moved to Maryland, and my cousin with the help of my cousin, I start cleaning bathrooms literally every night in Safeway, and then work as a stoker and as a server, and that led me to figure out. I was surprised. I'm like, hey, in America, I studied back home English philosophy and English language. And when I got to this country, I'm like, hey, even little people here speak English better than me. So I had to requalify myself. So where I'm going with this is I requalified myself how to clean the toilets and how to clean the floors very well. And eventually that led me to start my janitorial company in 2009, which is called Interworld Cleaning. And about 2 years ago, we hit over $1 million in sales in Interworld Cleaning. But along the way in 2009 and then in 2005, my partner and I started fixed construction, a home improvement company. And then in 2007, we've started a real estate investment company, which is called PRUZ. And PRUZ stands for PR for Puerto Rico and UZ for Uzbekistan. And now my partners and I are working on an excited cleaning tech startup. It's a marketplace which connects cleaners with those that are looking for the cleaning services in Uber-like fashion. And that is my passion project. And on top, I've got a book that is coming up. It's called The Immigrant's Companion, Making Your American Dream a Reality.
Awesome. Awesome. So tell me, I mean, starting from that point of view is obviously difficult, but what's some of the key management lessons you have learned along the way?
So luckily, cleaning is such a great industry to start, which means your overhead expenses are minimum to none. Because you just go, you open your closet, you take your vacuum cleaner from a closet, you just have to have a desire to work, right? And we all know how to clean throughout our years of just cleaning for ourselves, which is beautiful. Residential cleaning market is the easiest to tap in. And that was one of the reasons why I've picked the cleaning to start. As we grow, the challenges as business owners, most of us start facing as we grow is the time limitations, right? So we now try to clean try to clean ourselves. At the same time, try to do collections, try to sales, try to market, and etc. So one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn is how to part with my money and to pay for someone else to do that I don't want to do, quite frankly, or start delegating and hiring the right people. There were so many experiences which and some are unpleasant, right? Even involving the courts and litigation systems, but over the years you go through them and then you learn how to get better and better.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the key things you learned around hiring? Like what was the mistakes you did in the beginning?
So in the beginning, I actually, to my office manager, Christina, I talk about it. In the beginning, I think we all try to save, right? We're cheap. And then, so technically you try to do everything yourself. And then when there's a time to hire a right person, we first interview the right people. And then usually your guts can say, hey, this person is better, but this person is asking more. But then this person seems to be okay. And I can save a little bit for basically not doing the due diligence properly and or trying to save. Not each person has what they're worth for, right? The better the people in general, the rates are a little higher, but in return, you'll get a peace of mind and a better work ethic. So not doing the due diligence, trying to save, trying to cut corners in the beginning were bigger mistakes that eventually did end up costing me a lot more in the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've all been there. I mean, it's easy to try and save your way to a big company, but it's difficult in the longer run, right?
Yes, it costs more, unfortunately.
What about delegation? I mean, I think when I look at delegation, it's probably the number one thing that most of my customers struggle with the most in terms of, and from my experience, it's mostly mindset, right? But I'm curious from your point of view, like what did you learn around delegation? And what was sort of the core mistakes you felt you made?
Yes, delegation is huge. Thanks for asking the question. In learning how to delegate without being bossy, without being too controlling is also a skill. And to know, it has to come to a realization that you don't really have to do everything yourself. And you also need to understand that you can't do everything yourself. It's just impossible. To grow as a company, as a unit, or to go towards one goal, more people need to be involved. And the reason I'm able to take a phone call and or participate in podcast and or pursue my passion with writing a book currently without worrying how to pay my bills is because of the delegating skills. With delegation, first, we need to learn how to get out of our comfort zone when you ask someone. But at the same time, we need to learn how to trust the person's judgment that they will deliver. And if it's not done to your liking, instead of literally overriding the person, ask the how questions. Why? Can we do this better? Have you thought about this? So kind of like incentivize them to learn and adapt to your expectations. And it's big. It's kind of like a subtle art of walking a fine line where you want to give away as much control as you can while getting the results that you're hoping for.
Yes, I totally agree. One of the things I always talk about is adding the 1% value. So very often, when employees have an idea or when they've done a piece of job or something, and the business owners are often so eager to like, oh no, you shouldn't do it like this, but you could do it like this, like that. They're so eager to like correct, or they're so eager to tell people what to do, that they often take the joy and they take the excitement out of it for people. Because reality is, a lot of the time, the drive for most people is them coming up with ideas. It's them seeing things to fruition and really them making things happen, right? Just like it is for you and me. So a lot of the time, learning not to add that 1%, not to, if someone's doing something and it's done well, like just because you would have done it slightly different doesn't mean you have to tell people to do it that way if the result is the one you were after, right?
Yes. And sometimes you'll be surprised. Sometimes the result can be, if you give them enough freedom, the result, the sense of ownership, right? Is when they develop a sense of ownership, they look at a business as it's their own. I actually had, in the challenging times, managers of my company had approached me and said, we can actually take a pay cut if need be. And I'm like, no, we don't have to. But the reason they offered this is because they took the business as their own, right? That sense of ownership is huge. So, but that comes with the freedom as well. And statistically, more people quit because they don't feel that their role is, they're being fulfilled in their role.
Yeah, totally. And that's actually another great point. So one of the key things for me is always attrition, right? One of the key things is, if you're constantly seeing people leaving your company, a lot of the time it's easy to blame people, but if you typically see the same things happen again and again, it's probably more to do with you than maybe the people around. And it's difficult to look inward sometimes, but I think for many of the business owners I've worked with over the years, it's like, sometimes you need to get to the realization that it's not just everyone else that sucks. Sometimes you need to up your game as well. And that can be a really hard realization, but again, it's what makes a difference, right? Because if like most managers and most business owners, they're thinking they're doing things right because they're doing the best they know how to. Like, no one does a bad job on purpose, right? But a lot of the time, like management, like anything else, it's a skill to develop, and it's not just something you're good at. Like, you need to practice, you need to grow, and you need to develop, right?
Totally agree. Yes, absolutely.
How did you go about learning management? Like, all the difficult traps, or did you have some good people to look up to, or how did you go around learning that?
My last employer, 2009 to 2019, 2009, sorry, and go back. And now we're thinking in decades. When you're younger, you think about 1 year, 2 years. Now you're like, oh, it was fresh, like a decade ago. So yes, my last employers, Kirsten Brecht and Joey Yaffe, and I'm still good friends with them. They taught me a lot. If you can think about a guy who came from Uzbekistan, who had no clue about internet. The internet back then was dial-up and extremely slow, right? That's how you can probably still recall it. And I had no clue what Word is, what Microsoft Office is. And I kind of knew Bill Gates was the richest person on the planet, but that was the limit. So, and I studied English back then, but not the business, not the how to run the business. And I was fortunate and lucky. I did come across the right people, and I'm still good friends with them, and I really treasure the relationship we've built and are able to uphold since the year. So that taught me the basics of the business. Basically, I was an office manager. So, and that is one of the greatest positions that I can recommend to anyone who's trying to start on their own, but don't know where. So you can either get a mentor, right? Or you can become a part of a franchisee, like become a franchisee of a franchisor and learn from them. Or if neither one is good, go get an office manager position on a smaller company where you will know how they sales, market, manage people, accounting, credit, debit, all those basics. I was just fortunate enough to come across the right people throughout my career.
Yep. Yeah, I've also been in luck. A lot of the time you search the luck yourself, right, as well. But I've also been extremely lucky in my life, meeting lots of amazing people. And I think fundamentally, if you have the right drive, and I always tell people this, like a lot of the time people are like, why do you always help people and so on? Like, I think most people in life, when they see others in a position they used to be in, they're eager to help, right? Like everyone want to give back. Now, the problem is when, if people are asking for help, but it's obviously they don't care or whatever, then it's very different, right? But if people really want to, if they're actually really eager to learn, to grow and so on, then my experience is there's a ton of people around. Like, I mean, obviously, if you go and ask Elon Musk, I'm sure you haven't got the time, but there are lots of smart business people around wherever you live that are generally happy to help eager people, either as a mentor or a coach or something. And I've always, I think I've never actually had a no asking someone to be my mentor at any part in life. So I've always been extremely lucky having great mentors. And I think a lot of it just comes down to taking the initiative and asking the question, because reality is most people don't.
Yes. Most people don't like to ask the question, and just going outside of your comfort zone. And as they say, the true life begins outside of your comfort zone. So just go out, step out and ask the question, and more will say yes than no. It's paying forward, right? Yeah. So because we all at some point learn something, and when a person is willing to learn and listen, you can notice, and then you'll gladly share as much as you can in general.
And that's, I think also that's a big thing. Like, also successful people also understand the value of network, right? They understand the value of it's not just about them. It's not just help me do something for me, but they understand the value of having good people around you. And I mean, I have many people that I've helped either start their career, or, I have friends that I helped start businesses 10 years ago that have sold a business recently. And, that like the future is not just tomorrow. The future's a long, far away for many people, at least, right? So at least like when you think far ahead, when you think into the future and not just think about yourself and your own situation, then my experience is you always get positive feedback from people.
Agreed.
Cool. What's some of the best things that happened to you then? So we talked a little bit about mistakes and so on. What's some of the sort of lucky breaks you've had, or what's some of the things that, where you've been extremely fortunate with your circumstances?
I think things start changing for you when you start changing. As you said, right? The moment you become honest and open-minded, you start attracting people that are honest and open-minded. So the change starts from you. And there are a couple of things that the biggest fear for an employee to move into an employer position to become a business owner is, how am I going to meet my financial obligations? There were a point when I had like another epiphany moment, and I'm like, several years after, you go through the struggles. I mean, there were days and nights when I was literally like crying, darkest night in the coldest night in the Baltimore in the basement, which was humid. And I was like face to face with my checking account online, and I was terrified. But then you go through to just be resourceful and creative and ask for help whenever needed. When you go through all of those challenges, at some point you realize that working for yourself is the greatest thing you can actually do. This allows you to expand your potential, and it's more safer and secure than working for someone else. Even if you work for yourself and you end up bankrupt, let's say, right, you will learn from this experience, but then you're getting bankrupt, let's say, or closed off your company because of your mistakes, not some manager in a different state took the wrong shots. So at some point, and then if you are that case, right, then you will adapt, your mistakes. As Yuri Levine, the gentleman who sold Wise to Google for $1.x billion, says, make your mistakes, and then he puts fast and underlines it. So just don't be afraid of mistakes. And once you're out of your comfort zone, and then you know that your company is more stable because of your hard work, and no one will pay you as much anyways as you think you're worth, then you get out of that comfort zone, and then you're more safer and secure in your position. So that was one of the breakthroughs. Another breakthrough was probably when my ex-wife left me and took the kids with her. And that was basically a moment when I noticed that I stopped working for myself. So at some point in my life, I had almost paid off house, 2-car garage, 2 adorable girls, a business, a wife. And I think I became ignorant to some point, and I stopped working on myself. I stopped working on a family, and that costed me a lot. And the whole thing, to go over that, to go through it, took a lot of self-work, mindset changes, and I changed the circle of friends and how I think. A lot of those things changed. But at some point I became oblivious, and I was thinking, I'm the smartest, I'm the most successful person, right? And start working on myself and or those that were around me. So just, whenever, if success gets you, or when it finds you, just don't make sure your feet stays grounded to the earth.
Yeah, I think that, I was lucky to have some great people around me when I call it growing up. It wasn't really growing up, but when I was growing up in business, at least, I was lucky enough to have great people around me that was talking about the same. And I think, obviously, for some people, money is a huge driver, but I think fundamentally learning to understand that money is a tool and it's a resource, but it's not necessarily a cause for happiness, right? And it's so easy for people who don't have it to think so. But as someone that have studied happiness quite a bit, I can tell you that money and happiness is often not linked, and often actually even the reverse, in the sense of, like, if you look at all the people who have won the millionaire lottery or something like that, and suddenly go from having not a ton to being extremely rich, like, looking at their unhappiness develop after them winning the lottery, that is very, very interesting. And that is not what most people expect. And it's interesting to see that people walk around hoping they win the lottery, but those who do actually end up significantly more unhappy, or many of them end up significantly more unhappy, which is very, very unexpected for most people, at least. So,
well, happiness is within, right? You create it inside. So it's not like, let me buy a bigger TV, let me buy a bigger house, so you don't get the happiness from outside sources. So if you're not fulfilled inside, then you just won't be happy. Tony Robbins was saying in one of his podcasts, he's like, hey, when I went to India, I paid attention to these people who are poor, right? The ones that live outside. But they look at you and they smile and they're happy, and you can see a happiness in their eyes. And he was comparing it to an American society, which is predominantly, we try to get happy from things that are outside, or putting the happiness on someone else, right? If I only had this, I would be happier. If I only had this person, I would be happier. If I only had this item, I would be happier. But then you'd notice that, let's say you get that bigger TV, not 42-inch, now you got your 60-inch. A week from now, you're still in the same place. Maybe you will get that temporary burst of that happiness, But yes, unless you learn, what they say is a gratitude, what makes what we have, it turns what we have into enough. So it's the practice of gratitude that will make you, although having said that, you still need to make sure that your bills are paid, especially when you live in a country such as America, because bills never end. But there's a way to balance. I'm still learning it. I can't tell that I'm really good at it, but I'm in the right direction.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. And I totally agree. I mean, I find it often sad when I see people who are, their whole life is just depending on more. I need. And it's like, I find it sad that, for one, I know they're not going to be happy even when they have it. And that's probably the worst piece. Like, if they were actually going to be happy when they had whatever they were dreaming about, that would be one thing, right? But when you actually know that even when they get what they're wanting, they're not going to be happy, that actually makes me quite sad sometimes. Because I generally want people the best. So, yeah, interesting. Well, John, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. Just before you go, any sort of resources or anything that you recommend for people who want to learn more about management or business?
Mostly depending upon where you're at, right? So it depends where the person is in their life cycle and the mindset wise. The very first thing is the stuff that is free. YouTube is a huge resource, and none of us had this much access to knowledge at no cost 20 years from now. I mean, 20 years before, right?
Yeah.
So now we have so much access to knowledge, it's insane. So just to come up with an excuse that you don't know, it's just kind of like takes it off. So tap into YouTube, get as much information as you can. I would start from preparing your mindset or maybe possibly setting up morning rituals. So when you have, Dave Allen has a 2-minute rule, which says if a task takes 2 minutes or less, do it now. Because if you procrastinate it, you will spend more time, more energy, you might forget, you might not be in that circumstance. So take that as a learning curve. Like every morning, just wake up and say, before I drink my first cup of coffee and start my day, perhaps I will Google or YouTube or read a book. So literally just start an action, right? Pick a book, open the first page, just say you're going to read the first page. Then most likely you're going to read 5 or 10 and make a habit. Same thing goes for YouTube. Look up any person who will give you inspiration and start searching them. And most likely they are sharing wealth of knowledge. If you pass that stage and your mindset is strong and you know how to start the business or you've already started a business, then network, join the like-minded associations, and be present, right? Get out of your comfort zone. And if you're there, then start hiring the right people and delegating your work. So everything depends at what stage of your life you are, but there's always something or someone who's willing to help you. Just reach out. Positive affirmations, whatever you attract in your life, it's who you are. So just become a better version of yourself every single day from now on.
Fantastic. John, if people are eager to get hold of you, what's the best way to do so?
It's my website, AsrorJon Shukurov, AsrorJon, last name Shukurov, SHUKUROV.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. Thank you again very much for joining me today. That was a super fun conversation and awesome to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.